So before we start, we open our stage for a very special guest that I'm very much honored to welcome. Just let me put on a link between journalism and our next country. When Alexander Lukashenko crushed the protests in the streets of Minsk and other cities in Belarus, Russia would not only help with money and police, Russia also sent in Kremlin-linked journalists to change the way the protests were covered in Belarusian state media. And Lukashenko later even grounded a passenger plane to arrest a journalist. So journalism matters to these guys. I now have the great honor to welcome Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, the leader of democratic Belarus. Independent observers agree that she won the presidential election in August 2020 against dictator Lukashenko. Her story began when she entered the race after her husband, civil rights activist Sergei Tsikhanouskaya, was not allowed as a candidate and then arrested for voicing his presidential aspirations. The world watched with astonishment and admiration the uprising of the Belarusian opposition, the eruption of mass protests led by three strong, brave, charismatic women. And Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya became a symbol of the peaceful struggle for democracy all over the world. So Sviatlana, thank you very much for coming, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mareta, for your kind introductions. Dear ladies and gentlemen, let me start with the words of gratitude to Mayor Franziska Giffey. The city of Berlin became a safe haven for dozens of Belarusian activists, artists, by primarily media, journalists, and bloggers who fled repressions and continued their work from here. Like in the time of the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall, the information breaks through prohibitions and restrictions. Dictators cannot understand that the truth cannot be beaten with batons. It cannot be imprisoned. The truth, like water, will find a way out. The year 2020 was eye-opening for Belarusians, including myself. As it was already mentioned, I was just a mom and housewife, and I ran for president primarily because I wanted to support my husband, Sergei. He was illegally locked up because he was a popular blogger who dared to challenge the dictator. And thanks to technology, we got evidence that elections were stolen. Lukashenko shamefully lost. People have chosen freedom over tyranny. Thanks to journalists, we discovered the horrible truth about secret services, prisons, surveillance, and ongoing repressions that didn't stop for a single day. Thanks to social media, we realized that we are the majority. Indeed, it was a national awakening after 26 years of coma. Hundreds of thousands marched in 40 cities demanding free elections. Belarusians showed enormous effort and dedication in our peaceful, non-violent struggle against tyranny. Belarusians paid a big price for their bravery. Lukashenko unleashed terror against its own citizens. He used every tool from the dictator's playbook: arbitrary arrests, torture, kidnapping, interrogations, false confessions, death threats. He threatened European security with a flight hijack and orchestrated the migrant crisis. In the end, dictator Lukashenko supported the bloody Russian war against Ukraine. Since then, our resistance didn't stop for a single day, but it went underground. You don't see mass demonstrations. What demonstrations can you expect in a gulag? But almost every day, we heard about a small protest, graffiti, or sabotage action. 2 years after, Lukashenko didn't manage to turn the page. He behaves as thousands of protesters are still standing near his palace. After all, Lukashenko didn't bear responsibility for what he did. The feeling of impunity is what drives him. Dictators cannot be appeased. Dictators cannot be re-educated. They see concessions as a weakness. And I think the undecisiveness of Western democracies led us to where we are right now with Belarus and Russian war against Ukraine. I often hear that what happens in Belarus and Ukraine is the fight between the West and the East, but it's not true. It's the fight between democracy and tyranny, between truth and lies. But it's also a struggle between the past and the future. Our people chose freedom and democracy, but the evil past keeps dragging us back. For me, it's evident that the fight for freedom and the fight for truth is our common duty. I know that the most of you in this room are not politicians, but I would love to ask you to do three simple things. First one is write a letter to a political prisoner. There is a website called Politsec. You can pick one of 1,340 brave men and women. You can adopt him or her, write a tweet or post. You can support their family. Then I ask you to provide young Belarusians with jobs or internships in your company or organization. Provide art residencies and fellowships if you are a mayor, for example. Up to 300,000 Pride people fled repressions and stayed in Europe. They will learn from you and will bring this knowledge and experience to New Belarus. Also, you can donate to Belarusian journalists, activists, and cyber partisans who continue their fearless work on bringing changes. You can also support Belarusian military volunteers in Ukraine who liberate eastern regions of Ukraine alongside Ukrainians. And finally, I want to say thank you for keeping Belarus high on the agenda. Belarus shouldn't be overlooked because it matters for democracy and security of Ukraine, the region, and the entire Europe. And I want to remind you that dictatorships like the one in Belarus appear to be strong and stable, but only until they are not. So the situation in our country can develop very quickly, and we have to be prepared for all possible scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. At the very end, you were talking about the war in Ukraine, the Russian war. What impact do you see on your own movement, on the democratic movement of Belarus?
Of course, for Belarusian people, it was a shock when the war has started. I am sure we were not prepared for such development of the situation because we could never believe that the war in our region could happen again, especially against our brothers Ukrainians. But since the very beginning of the war, Belarusian people showed their anti-war position. And on the 27th of February, the hugest rally took place in Belarus, anti-war rally. Of course, people knew that they could be jailed because of this rally, but it was important for Belarusian people to show our attitude. And it's very important now to distinguish between regime and between Belarusian people. Belarusian people are against the war. Regime became the collaborant in this anti-Ukrainian war, giving our soil, giving our land to Russian army. But Belarusian people from the beginning started to help Ukrainians as much as we could in that situation, in the situation of huge repressions and tortures in our country. Our brave partisans disrupted railways to stop Russian technique and equipment going through our country to Kiev direction. And for sure, it slowed down invasion of Ukraine from Belarusian border. Also, ordinary people send information to Telegram channel, again using new technologies, giving information about movement of Russian troops, about missiles launched, about aircrafts in the sky. They gave this information to the Ukrainian army, and it was very, very useful for Ukrainians. Also, Belarusian people who once fled Belarus because of repressions, knowing what it means, to grab your child, to grab one back and escape from terror, they started to help Ukrainian refugees. People, 86% of Belarusian people are against participation of Belarus in this war. Our army refused to participate. Our soldiers don't want to go against Ukrainians. They don't have such feelings, bad feelings against Ukrainians. We don't want to break our good relationship with the Ukrainian people. So now we continue to support Ukrainians as much as we can on political level inside the country. Also, Belarusian regiments has been formed in Ukraine. Up to 1,000 military volunteers are fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian army. Of course, this war influences a lot on ordinary people. People are afraid of any war, but we have very a clear position about this war, and Lukashenko didn't manage to persuade people that there is special operation, that there is Nazism in Ukraine, and so on. People know how to get alternative information. They want to know the truth about it.
Do you think people have access to information beyond propaganda, both in Belarus and in Russia?
For sure, state propaganda is like I would say efficient instrument inside Belarus, and state propaganda absolutely reiterate Russian narrative about this war. They want to persuade people that it's normal to fight against Ukrainians. But for 2 years of our resistance, people know how to get truth, how to get alternative information. They use different Telegram channels, Ukrainian, Belarusians. They're watching our bloggers on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, to get this information. Even for those maybe old generation or people who live in villages and don't have access to internet, our volunteers inside Belarus spread self-made newspapers. So it's very important to fight with state propaganda, and we use all possible means to show people the truth.
Now, if we look at your situation, for over 2 years now, you live in exile. Your husband is in jail, in prison. You can't talk to him. The other two great women, Maria and Victoria, one is in prison, one is in exile as well. How can you influence the things going on in Belarus? Is there still hope for you?
Of course, there is hope. It's not even hope. It's I'm sure that we will win this fight. That Belarusian people changed already, and Lukashenko will not be able, to return the things to as they were in 2020. So I'm communicating with people on the ground using, again, Zoom conferences or whatever. It's very easy to do this now. I'm communicating to people who had to flee the country. And I see that people are not giving up, but people need energy. People need to feel that they are not abandoned, that they are supported. And every small victory, every small sign of solidarity from our international partners or international society gives this energy to Belarusian people. So they feel that they are not left one on one, with this political and humanitarian crisis in our country. So people really see this support, see this solidarity, but I suppose that much more can be done. We need more political pressure and economic pressure on the regime on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's very important to support people, support media, support human rights defending centers who are doing a huge job, support our students and people of culture. So only this combination, pressure and support, will help us, to continue our fight. People in Belarus will not give up, but it can be done with much less losses from the side of fair, free Belarusian people.
I mean, you entered politics all of a sudden. That was not what you wanted to do. And now all of a sudden you are on world stage, but you are alone with your kids in Vilnius. Your husband is in jail. How do you cope with it? How do you find the energy you were talking about to carry on?
Look, first of all, I will not open you the secret that women are much stronger than they could seem. But look, I know that I'm surrounded with wonderful Belarusians. I'm surrounded with people all over the world who really want to help us Belarusians. And I understand that I'm not alone. There are millions of Belarusians around me. But look, it's not only about me, of course. I know that people will never forgive all the crimes that have been committed in Belarus since 2020. People feel their responsibility for our political prisoners who sacrificed with their freedom, some with their lives, to give us opportunity to continue. And every day you think about your husband or Masha Kolesnikova or Stepan Latypov, about how they feel in jails. And even if you are tired, even if you're exhausted, you just can't stop. And the same as for other Belarusians, every small victory gives me energy, gives energy to democratic forces, to ordinary people. But this can be gained only when we are together, and we are keeping together, we are keeping united, despite of the processes that are going on in the regime. People are sure that we will gain this victory.
Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, thank you very much for taking your time, for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you very much, and keep strong. Thank you.